you have a dream or a passion that you're telling yourself is impossible, that you can't do it, fast forward and say, like, will I be happier in the end that I didn't try?
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. One of the things that we like to do is find guests that are doing things just a little bit differently, thinking outside the box, challenging convention. And this week's guest is called Stacey Mulvey, and she's combining the age-old practice of yoga with the consumption of cannabis. And Stacey's created three very, very different and unique business models. So please have a listen, let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoy this episode. My wife actually was reading, and we like to kind of, I guess, a lot of our audience is in the fitness and wellness space, and we like to, I suppose, show people and give people ideas of other things that are going on in that world. And my wife kind of mentioned this one, and we had a look at it, and I thought, this is pretty interesting. You know, yoga, certainly for me, is a new thing I'm slowly trying to get into and make a place in my workout for yoga. And when I saw this, I thought, oh, I've never heard that before. So tell me the story. Tell us a bit about yourself, and what's your background then, Stacey?
Sure. Well, so there's kind of a couple stages for my story. I started doing yoga as sort of this epiphany where I was really out of shape. You know, I just had a really sedentary life and completely out of shape. Everything always hurt. My body was in complete pain, and that led me to a lot of victim consciousness. You know, just like telling myself stories about like why, it was everybody else's fault that I was hurting, and it was like the universe cursed me and that sort of thing. And I had this. I mean, it was literally just one night of me like going through telling myself this story, and I had this sort of like epiphany that came through where I was like, well, wait a minute, is that really true? Is it everybody else's fault, or is it my fault? And, it was like this, like, oh my God kind of thing. Like, it's actually my fault, right? Like, there's no one's going to do this for me. No one's going to change my body and how I feel in my body, and except for me. And so, that really, there was like the before time and then the after time. And then that set me on this path of, moving my body every day. I set a goal, and I was like, okay, I'm going to move. And yoga was actually called Kalinetics, which is kind of a type of yoga, similar to yoga. So that, like I said, that just like set me on this path, whereas I was moving, and that really transformed my life. And then fast forward a couple more years where I had decided, I had just realized the benefits. I was much happier. I was much more just living more like a healthier lifestyle. I had changed a lot of those victim consciousness patterns, and I had another sort of, but this wasn't like a lightning bolt epiphany, but it was me realizing that I was in a corporate job, like I was sharing with you earlier. I was in this job that it was just crushing my soul to be at every single day, and decided to quit my job and start becoming a Pilates teacher. It was like another thing of like, no one's going to change this for me, and I feel like I would rather at the end of my life look back and say, well, at least I tried to do it, instead of regretting that I never did, that I wasted my time.
What interested you about Pilates? Why was that a subject?
It was, honestly, it was between, I was oscillating between yoga and Pilates, and I was fortunate because I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and there was just more education that I could receive through Pilates versus yoga. Most yoga programs stop at 200 hours, and like some go on to 500 hours, but Pilates programs, the one that I went through was 950 hours, and I just wanted everything, right? I just wanted to dive in and just get as much education as I could. Just take it because I was taking it as seriously, I was like, this is me, like I'm changing everything about myself, right? So I'm changing my identity, so I might as well just go all in. And so yeah, and then I was, in hindsight, I was really glad because everything that I learned with Pilates, I could really apply to yoga. And, you know, even though I did take some yoga training after the fact, it was all, I had just that much better of an understanding that I could go, that foundation of Pilates really, really enabled me to understand yoga at a deeper level. So, yeah, so then at the time, I was a cannabis smoker for a long time, up until I had moved to Colorado, and I was in a space where emotionally, mentally, it wasn't serving me. So I stopped for a couple of years, and then I went, like I said, this transformation of wanting to become a Pilates teacher, and I had this experience where I started smoking cannabis again, and I had discovered CBD, and I was really struggling with the completion of my Pilates teacher training program. I was at the end. And this was a very rigorous program where I was expected to understand some advanced moves in my body, and I was not getting it. It just, I don't know what it was, but I couldn't coordinate it. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't, you know, it was like, I'm a mess. I don't get this. Then there was this like kind of magical, like another, you can tell I have like different, like, I'm like, okay, this was the epiphany. This was the epiphany. This was the epiphany. So the epiphany with cannabis, you know, it was me moving, and I just felt this incredible sense of being embodied, and everything started to make sense, you know, not in a logical way.
And when you said CBD, then, just for somebody who's listening who doesn't know, what's CBD and what's cannabis? Is it the same thing?
Sure. Yeah. So cannabis sativa is the plant, and it's typically divided into marijuana or like hemp. Marijuana, for legal purposes, contains THC. Hemp, it's still the same plant, but it has really low amounts of THC, and the cannabinoid, so that's the component of it's a molecule of cannabis. CBD is the non-psychoactive component of cannabis sativa, and it's just like classified. It's just kind of like naming the plant, which is universal, which is cannabis.
Right.
So, so CBD is hemp, marijuana, THC.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And you when you started doing your Pilates, then you were using the CBD, and
correct.
And what was that doing to your body or your mind then?
So I've looked into it since then. Like at the time, I didn't really understand it. I just felt like very embodied, and it just felt like everything was just aligning and coming together. But I've gone back and researched to figure out like why was that, and cannabis actually affects CBD and THC affect our proprioceptive sense. So the way that you can sense where your body is in space, cannabis attunes your proprioceptive sense, and it also, you know what I mean, it changes your frame of mind. You know, we know that from the psychoactivity of THC. It can, you know, open your mind, can expand your consciousness. And then CBD also acts on your bones and your muscles. It's a little hard to say specifically what it does because there's still so much research that has to be done, but I've been able to actually go back and, you know, put that together where it's like, okay, great, it does affect our proprioceptive sense. So
and in respect to then Pilates, then what's the benefits? Is that just that you're more in tune with your body? Would you say?
Yeah. So a lot of what Pilates and yoga is, you know, basically taking your habitual patterns, especially with Pilates. Yoga, it does, but I don't know that when we're teaching yoga that we necessarily speak to that. I know I do, but you know, as a whole, yoga, you know, isn't as concerned with that. But with Pilates, it's like, okay, you know, here's your habitual pattern where, you know, perhaps you pronate your ankle when you're running, for example, and it's just habitual, so you can't really tell that you're doing it, right? So being able to sort of interrupt that pattern or give you enough space to where you can get aware of like, oh, it's actually maybe something I'm doing in my hip, or, you know, what have you. Maybe you're actually just twisting your knee more than you're expecting to, that type of thing. So gaining that awareness so that you can start to retrain that pattern is why that would start to help.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you realized that through when you was doing your end of your studying, you started to realize that there was a benefit with it.
Well, and the thing is it wasn't like this, like, as linear as I'm describing it now. When the experience that I had, it was like sort of this all at once thing where it was just like, wow, like I can feel my hips, I can feel my core, I can do, I can kind of like pull this all together at this like gestalt that I was missing before. But, it was just so profound. It was like the self-evident thing for me where I'm like, okay, well, cannabis and mindful movement, like that's it. Like they are a pair. I understand that. I get it. But at the time I didn't feel comfortable in saying anything to anybody except for maybe a couple of friends that I also knew that were stoners in the Pilates program that I was in, like, hey, I've had this experience, and them being like, yeah, I totally get that because I've had the same thing. And so this was right when Colorado was voting for the legalization of weed. Like we had just voted for it, and it wasn't quite legal yet. So it was still pretty stigmatized, right? It was still, whether or not it was legal, the culture was still like, it's what people think of as in terms of cannabis. That they're they're lazy, they're dumb, they're not motivated, and that sort of thing. So, I was just starting out with my career. I wasn't gonna really label myself as the cannabis teacher. I was like, I need to start working. So, so I did. And honestly, it's funny when I look back, I was really only a teacher in that space for a shorter amount of time than I've been open and out about the fact that I combine, that I integrate cannabis with yoga. So it's a little weird how time works that way, but yeah. So I started working part-time in the cannabis industry just because I was so fascinated by it, and I just felt so strongly about it. And it was amazing to watch a brand new industry spring up, and just all the creativity and passion that was going into it. And it really took some hard, just some introspection and fighting, a lot of demons in terms of, I don't know. It's funny. I had like a plan of like starting like a false Facebook account, and so it would never be tied to me or something, so I could still do cannabis and yoga and still have my like Pilates career on the side. And it, I had to take a look at that and be like, really, is that going to be in your integrity to pretend to be someone else? Like, how long are you really going to maintain that? So.
Yeah. So when you was involved in the industry then, so in Colorado they legalized it,
right?
And so was that when you was writing for one of the magazines? Was that how you kind of got into that?
Oh, I was actually working for a travel agency in Colorado. Right. So they were doing tours and classes, and I started working for them doing their social media actually. So I had a knack for social media, and I was.
What kind of tours were they like? Bringing people?
They were taking people to dispensaries on a shopping trip, and they were touring cultivation facilities, so you could walk through and see the plants, and get back on the bus and smoke weed on the bus. And
that was the business that they were in.
That was the business, right. Yeah. So I was helping them run the tours as well, and teaching the painting classes too. So. It was really fun because people from outside of Colorado, even people in Colorado, were like, wow, this is like mind-blowing stuff to be able to like smoke weed with a bunch of strangers and feel accepted and feel like it's okay and be doing something fun, and then, going on with the rest of your day, or actually probably just going back to your hotel room and going to sleep. But
how did they change that? So I guess, if you're not from a state where that's legal, I suppose you're right. There is a lot of sort of stigma attached to it, and you know, from being involved in it, is it very much a marketing message where they're now sort of trying to position it that it's good and it's medical, or is that some truth in it, or is it good and it's, you know, it's good for you, but it's just, you know, people have not been given all the facts. You know, how from sort of being involved in that, how would you see what's sort of happened in places like Colorado?
Yeah, it's, you know, there are like two sides of the industry, and I think the loudest side right now is still the side of where it's not really doing itself any favors, because it is a recreational substance, and it can be used for, you know, for recreational purposes, like, you know, having fun and cutting loose, and you know, just you know, similar to drinking. But what I'm trying to do is highlight the side of where it can be integrated for health purposes and for wellness purposes. And, you know, there's a piece of that takes some responsibility. And I know that's a little bit challenging to kind of impart that to that other side, you know, where it's like, you know, it doesn't have to just be about, you know, getting high and you know, not doing anything with that. For me, it's about, like, you know, that state, that altered state, like you can apply to, you know, like painting, for example, or yoga, like doing something that will actually take your consciousness and employ it with something. And you know, I liken it to flow states. So, you know, we can enter a flow state through running. We can enter a flow state through also creative activities. And for me, I feel like it's almost a wasted opportunity in some ways. And it's not to say that there isn't some benefit. I mean, sometimes we all need it. Like we were talking about, you know, the world is so loud at us with just like this constant din of you know, notifications and what have you. It's like there's definitely some benefit for just like meditating or just like watching TV and not doing anything. However, there's also a piece, if you can use cannabis for healing. And to me, to really set off on that healing journey, that means also like taking a look at what, you know, first of all, what you're trying to heal, and then what you are doing as far as taking responsibility to heal yourself. So if you are looking to, you know, get some respite from a chaotic world and, you know, kind of get your consciousness back underneath your control, you know, how about using that altered state to, you know, write in a journal, you know, write down some thoughts, or paint a picture just for the sake of it, you know, or just moving your body, getting back to like, what is your consciousness, and like what thoughts or feelings were you looking to heal, and kind of taking a look at that.
When you say healing, then what do you mean by that then? Like sort of mental healing or physical healing or everything?
Yeah, well, yeah, kind of everything. Because a lot of disease, if you will, you know, it can come from a thought process. A lot of disease that we suffer from, or a state of mind, will actually start to affect our physical body. And I think that once you've decided, like often when people come to cannabis, it's because they have some sort of issue that they have decided they would like, that they're seeking healing for. And it's usually a physical condition. It's like some sort of pain or, you know, some condition that's brought them to that point, and they're feeling like they're not getting it addressed by our allopathic Western medicine. And, you know, the mindset that we typically have too as people in the Western world is, you know, that healing takes place through something outside of ourselves, like through something external. Like you're the doctor, you gave me a pill, okay, well now I take that pill and I'll, you know, get better. And then, oh, that doctor, that wasn't working for me, you know, so now I'll take another pill and I'll take another pill. And so to me, like once if you've come to in your journey, if you're like, you know, I think I'm going to take a look at cannabis, you're already sort of stepping outside of that traditional message of how healing's supposed to take place, which is good, but it's like it also involves taking responsibility for stepping outside. It's like, okay, great, you empowered yourself. You're looking at how you could heal yourself through alternative means. You know, take that empowerment a step further. You know, take that empowerment for, if you're looking for something natural to heal yourself, let's look at your diet. Let's look at your movement. You know, are you moving? Are you engaged in, you know, complex activities aside from work and video games, or, you know, what have you?
It must be a fine line, though, to, I guess you can, how do you sort of, how are you careful enough for people that it doesn't just become a crutch? Like, because as you said, people are waiting for a drug, you know, give me this drug to make me feel better. And I suppose with something like cannabis, it's, okay, well, you're going to feel better and you're going to be in a different state. How do you sort of make sure that's being used correctly instead of that creating another addiction to something that's going to allow them to escape from reality?
Yeah, I know, and that's the tough part. That's where I have a lot of work to do, is try to impart that message where, and it's, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it's been tough. I haven't been, you know, like necessarily like well received in the cannabis world. It's not that, you know, that there's anything like they're kicking me out or anything like that, but there is that side, like I was speaking to you before, there is that piece of just like, let's just kind of party, and all I can do is kind of keep like holding space for it. It's like, yes, but the reason that we set out to legalize this, aside from the social issues of incarceration of people of color at this disproportionate rate, the other reason is because of the healing that it provides for people. And so I'm seeking to hold space for the piece, for the message of, you know, this substance, this plant is intended for healing and altering our consciousness. And let's look at that. Like, let's look at the deeper level of that. Let's see, like, what we can do to meet that healing halfway. And like I keep saying, taking responsibility for that, and not just use it as another way to kind of numb ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Has there, you know, I guess here now, from what I understood previously, there's very little research been available because it's been an illegal substance. Has more research been done on sort of genuine health benefits on the substance?
Yes, yeah, especially in the context of exercise, which is fascinating. Yeah, there was a study in April of this year from the University of Colorado at Boulder, where they just they may have had like a couple of different studies in one like complete study, but they specifically studied cannabis with exercise, and they showed that it increased pleasure during, or you know, it increased enjoyment of exercise, and so which is pleasure, I guess, enjoyment, and then also increased recovery afterwards, which then increased motivation to continue exercising. And that seems to be the reason why people don't, right? Because they don't have motivation, or they're like, it's not fun. So, and they're also, I
thought that also makes you not, like from what I've heard, people lying down on couches and not doing anything. So you're saying it can be motivating as well.
Correct. And they also, this other portion of the study, so they took mice and they basically removed the Cb1 receptor, so the receptor that gets you high, whether it's endogenously through endocannabinoids, or
do we have a Cb1 receptor, humans?
We have our own, yes, so it's the endocannabinoid system. Every mammal has the endocannabinoid system, and it affects every part of our body. And this is a really important medical discovery. It's been known about since the 90s, but they're just starting to actually like find exactly like what it does. So I was going to say, so the mice, they made it so that they couldn't receive anandamide. And those mice were actually, they were lazier than the mice that had the capacity to get high. So the mice that were able to get high had more physical activity than the ones that couldn't. Like they were the lazy ones. So it's like counter to the stereotype, like completely. So I mean, that's not to say that human beings are, I mean, you know, there's like more complexity there, but just biologically that doesn't hold. So.
Wow, that's interesting. So how did you then, so coming back to your story then, how did you decide to connect what you were doing with Pilates and yoga, and what was the connection? Was that something that you just seen moving, you thought you believe in it and you're going to give it a go, or tell us how that originated and how did you go about telling people about it?
Yeah, it really was just like, you know what, I think there's something here. I know there's something here. I don't really know how to explain it yet, but I felt inspired from, you know, the company that I was working with, and just seeing how, you know, you can take cannabis and take it as an intersection with what you're passionate about, and, you know, why not? Like, give it a try. So I really, you know, I remember, like I was saying, I had these like fantasies of like, oh, I'll start some like, you know, alter ego, and that's how I'll do it. Yeah. And then it was just like, that's ridiculous. So I finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna just be brave and take what comes, you know. And honestly, it was really scary, but I felt like, I'm like, in time, I feel like it'll play itself out, you know. People will come into acceptance, and I know like it'll be sticky for a while. So yeah, I mean, it really just came through social media.
So what was your idea first then? Just to run classes, was it?
Just to run classes. Okay. Yeah, just to start running classes. And I started running them in Denver. What
was your first one like?
It was great. It was on election night of 2016. So going into it, I thought, you know, this will be fantastic. This will be the greatest, you know, way to start my company and start my brand. And it turned out to be, you know, it was a very impactful night, because it was, you know, we were so like, of course I was on this like huge rush of like, you know, it worked out well, you know, because you like go in feel like having nerves. And
so did you, really well. in terms of that class then, did before everybody came in, did they tell me the agenda then? Did you get everyone come in and you start smoking joints, or what was it like?
Yeah, so in that particular venue, so it sort of depends on where the class is held. Certain venues, we only have like CBD vaporizers and CBD tea and CBD oil.
Right. And that's the non-psychoactive.
That's the non-psychoactive, right. Because that's legal, just like 100%. And this is a building where the public had access, so in order to stay compliant, it was just like straight CBD. But people, you know, there's an assumption that people probably smoked in their car or something ahead of time. But so yeah, so I had, you know, the tea bar set up. So we had, you know, the different samples. I had CBD tea ready to go, and you know, we gather at the tea bar, set up the tea bar so we have a place to socialize, because that's also an important component of Marijuasana for me, to be a little bit counter to the typical yoga class where people are very like sit on their mats and get really intense, to be a little more open and community based. Also just to welcome in and acknowledge the fact that we're all there understanding that we all have an affinity for cannabis, or at least a curiosity. And I want to acknowledge that with people, that they have a community, you know, they don't have to be ashamed of their affinity. So anyway, back to the class. So we went through, and then we'll start out with CBD. We'll go through, I'll lead about 30 minutes of yoga, and then we have a break, and just so that way we can get more cannabinoids, whether it's THC or CBD or, you know, all of the above. And then we do like another 30 minutes or so, and by the end of that class, we were like, you know, you feel so great after yoga, right? Feeling so good. And it took, you know, like packing up and everything, about 10 minutes after, I was like, yeah, I can't wait to look at my phone and see, you know, all the great news. And
about the elections.
Yeah, about the elections. And it was like, oh no, like, you know, she hadn't officially lost, Hillary Clinton hadn't officially lost at that point, but it was not looking good. And so I had volunteered for the initiative in Denver for social consumption. It was called Initiative 300, and I was invited to an election night party to see if that had passed. So that's when he officially won, was when we were at the party. Again, it passed, so we were excited, but it wasn't, you know, there were a lot of deflated and sad hearts by the end of that night. So, but like it gave me hope, though. It was like, well, maybe this is actually a really good time to start, because there was so much depression. I mean, real sad, like a really depressed feeling after, feeling like the worst possible candidate had won, and then like, what were we in for? And I'm like, well, this can be an answer to that in a way. You know, it was so out there, and it still is in its way. I mean, it's been 3 years since then. It still is,
and you're
like,
still getting over it.
yeah. And it's still, and like what I'm doing is still so out there that it's kind of an answer, right, in a way.
Yeah. So you did your first one with CBD then, and then what did you think that this? Obviously got good feedback from it, and you decided to kind of expand that concept, or what was your next steps from there?
Yeah. So I taught a few. I continued to teach in Denver, and then I started to actually travel to Washington, D.C. and teach there. And then after Washington, D.C., I started to do a couple classes up in Boston. Once I started doing classes up in Boston, it really started taking off. Like I got a couple of articles, like they saw the Boston Globe and a couple of other publications saw that I was doing classes, and then it just sort of took off.
Why do you think that was? Because it was something that was that different, or was it what people were getting from the class, or a combination?
I think it's probably a combination. Yeah. I think well, initially, because when I started getting that media was before I had even had a class, so I think it just kind of spoke to whoever was looking at it. And the classes in Boston were sold out. I mean, they just, something about the East Coast, man, I don't know. You're just like, yeah, we need this. Yeah. So, and it's funny, I actually, like, my largest audience is still in Boston. It's amazing. But yeah, I think it just resonates with people. I think they see that. And most of, so it's about half and half. Half the people in my class are like, yeah, I've been doing this before every yoga class. I just never say anything. I'm just in there hoping no one realizes that I'm high. Or there's also a huge portion of people that they've never done yoga before, but they come because they feel like it's going to be accessible to them because of the cannabis. And I just love that. I really love that they are bringing themselves out to move their body and be part of something like that, because they feel like they have acceptance. So,
do you have to be, I guess, taking cannabis to do the class, or are you sort of, is that part of the whole experience, or do people come that don't do it?
People can come and just do the yoga. That's totally fine. Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to at least like try some CBD, because if they're, because I understand not everyone wants the psychoactive effects, perhaps. So the CBD will still help to increase recovery. It'll help decrease your inflammation after the class, and increase circulation, like as you're moving and afterwards. So I encourage people to at least give that a try. But I mean, there's no, like requirement. No. So yeah.
Is it a certain type of yoga that you could do? Because I don't know a huge amount about yoga at all, but I understand there's different types, and some more athletic and some more kind of slower. What type of yoga is it that you do?
Mine's more slower and more controlled, and that's because, well, first of all, from my Pilates background, it's really important to me for people to give people a chance to actually feel what I'm asking them to feel. And I intentionally teach so that the descriptions that I'm using will hopefully allow the person that's moving to feel what's happening inside their own body, versus where I feel like a lot of fitness and a lot of movement gets taught from like this external vantage point. Like, you should look like what I'm doing. Like, look at me and do what I'm doing, versus, you know, like, how does it actually feel inside yourself? So I like to try and shift the perspective to like how you are feeling inside and what the movement is doing to your own structure. And so therefore it tends to make it a little more deliberate and like slower and more gentle. But the gentle might be misleading, because it can go quite deep. So yeah, and because I have to teach too, I have to make sure I'm accommodating people who have never moved at all. I try to teach it in layers. So it's like, okay, what I'll do is, like, for the first round is do like a really basic setup. And then as we go through, then it's like, okay, you know, if this is your first time, we're going to keep doing that. If you know what you're doing, then we'll take this, you know, to a more advanced state the next time we go through. So that way everybody's needs are hopefully met by the time we're done.
How do you sort of get people to know what the right amount to take is? Like, do you get people that are just like too stoned and they're like, I can't even, you know, I know I can't balance doing yoga when I'm normal, so I'm just wondering whether you've got people falling over and or not.
You'd be surprised. Like, if you start moving, because I hear that a lot, where they're like, how do you stay up? But you'd be surprised, like, how well you do better than you think you will. I do just, I mean, if this has happened in one class where I'm like, you can, you know, lay down on your mat if you want, and just, or do take a child's pose for the next few minutes. Yeah, I trust, I mean, I'll ask people, I'll greet people and ask if it's their first time, and I'll make recommendations. Like, if you know, if you've smoked weed before, I'll let you do your thing, right? But if you have never done it before and you're looking for advice, I'll recommend like just taking like one puff and then like wait and see how you feel, because it can hit everyone differently. So.
Do you get people kind of falling about laughing in the classes, or you control that? Imagine everyone bursting out laughing.
Not really, because I'm very serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't allow for that.
No, actually, I bring a sense of humor. I actually try to get people to laugh during the class. Yeah, as long as we're moving, I feel like, life's too short to be that serious. So I try to make sure it's like, yeah, we're getting something done, but we're having fun at the same time. Yeah. So yeah. I
guess that's an interesting experience, because I suppose if it's, as you said, if you're getting something done and you're enjoying it, like you mentioned about the mice and the exercise, and I suppose that's great. If you're getting fit, it's good for you, and you're enjoying it, then what better thing to do, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're building in that intrinsic reward, right? Then it's like, I want to move because it feels good and it makes me happy.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any negative side effects then that you're aware of for doing something like that?
I mean, it's subjective in that some people might classify the euphoria as something that they're, that like gives them anxiety. Right. So that could be considered a negative side effect if it was like, oh, I didn't want to be that, laughing that hard or something like that. There's also an issue with hydration. I encourage people to stay hydrated because there's, dry mouth is a known side effect. So it's like definitely drink plenty of water before, during, and after class. It's not that you're necessarily like losing water, but you might find that you feel more dehydrated because because of the dry mouth. Other than that, there's really not, there aren't that many negative side effects to cannabis, which is why it's such a great supplement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you go about promoting something like that? Because I guess there must be, like, we're in Vegas, and I know it's kind of, you mentioned it's here, they're quite strict, even though it is legal. Are there certain rules around? I know certainly on things like Facebook and that, I don't think you're allowed to promote marijuana. Is that right?
Yeah, It's tough. You have to get really creative because yes, Facebook, Google, sometimes they'll shut down your account. They shut down my ad account. I was getting away with advertising on Facebook for like a week, and then they flagged me. And yeah, and I mean just anything, even though it said nothing about marijuana, and even though the class itself at the time was just the CBD class, they don't. Yeah, they're very strict. So yeah, I mean that's why it's sort of tough as an entrepreneur. You have to find creative ways to get the word out. Right now I have a mailing list of people that have said that they're interested, so I can directly market to them. So, you know, there's that. But of course, I don't have the reach that I would if I could market on Google or Facebook. And there are specific restrictions as far as how large the cannabis leaf can be, like in Nevada particularly, like how much of the advertisement can have a cannabis leaf. You can only have 15% or something like that. So it just makes it like, I just won't use that, or, how do I word this so people know what it is without the state getting mad at me? You have to think creatively. Yeah.
Is that likely to change? You mentioned how in Nevada they're almost becoming the sort of gold standard in terms of regulation and for when it does become legal. Have you seen what's happening here, and do you think that sort of, from an advertising perspective, is likely to change in the near future, or not really?
I hope that that Facebook, because even though, it's kind of like this love-hate relationship with Facebook, and there's a lot of backlash right now in terms of popular culture, I hope that they start, once they go federally legal, and honestly it goes back to banking. The reason that they're so strict is because they're afraid that whatever financial institution they're aligned with will pull out, because financial institutions are so concerned about the status of whether or not it's legal. So I'm hoping that when it goes federally legal, and banking is not an issue anymore, that these larger companies, because they have to be realizing what they're missing out on. I'm sure that they wish that they could, but their attorneys or whoever probably won't let them. So so I'm hopeful, knock on wood, that at least hemp and CBD will no longer be an issue.
You mentioned that people have to be responsible when they're doing it. How do you, as an entrepreneur, promoting this type of, I guess, way of good living, how do you help people be responsible in terms of how they use it and what they use? Because I guess there's also lots of different types of strengths and different formulas and stuff. Is that something that you cover when you speak to people, or do you let them work that out themselves?
I tend to let them work them out. I like to assume that people are adults and they're not there for a lecture, and that hopefully the message of moving their body, it's sort of implicit in their attendance there, that they're getting that. If I'm asked specifically, I recommend tracking what you're doing. If someone's like, well, I want to know, how much I should use for this specific condition, or, if this strain is good for me or not, to really, start a journal and start, tracking like what you're doing, and identifying what it is that you'd like to heal, the issue that you're looking to address, and then start recording. I smoked this much on this day, and whether or not that addressed my symptoms, and if it did, then there you go. You can kind of keep experimenting. And again, it just goes down to that whole idea that you are empowering yourself with your own healing, and you're taking control over that, instead of handing it over to me or to the doctor. So
I know when sort of researching this, I was reading that one of the most popular forms of it is now like edible, taking edible as opposed to smoking it. What's the difference between those two in your mind, and do you recommend one or the other, or?
So it depends. There's an edible that you're digesting in your intestines, and then there are also products that you eat that are actually transdermal. So
What does that mean?
So it means it'll get absorbed into your bloodstream because it's okay. So there are different products. There's a new technology where they're nano-emulsifying these molecules so that they can, be absorbed through the tissues in your mouth and esophagus. The onset for that will be like within minutes, almost as fast as inhalation or faster. If you ingest it and it goes through your digestive tract and it's just an oil and it's not nano-emulsified, then it could take up to an hour or more for that to actually take effect. So I would recommend determining, like, okay, is this product, is it sublingual, transdermal? That's kind of the same thing. Or is this, an actual edible where my intestines will absorb it? And you can find that out from the dispensary or, hopefully like the website if you didn't check before you bought the product. If it's an edible that's going into your intestines, start with the small, like this absurdly small dose. Like for me, they say start at 10 and then wait an hour. I have to start at like 2 or 3 because 10
2 or 3
is
what?
2 or 3 milligrams. I'm
Right.
sorry. Yeah. Milligrams.
Okay.
And wait for an hour and wait for an hour and a half or even 2 because edibles can be a very uncomfortable experience if you're not used to it. And just know that your tolerance for edibles is different from your tolerance from smoking weed. Your body, the molecule that your body is actually absorbing is not delta-9 THC. So when you're inhaling it, that's what's making you high. It's delta-9 THC. When you're eating it, it's 11-hydroxy THC, and the tolerances are completely different. So keep that in mind for sure. Yeah, again, it's just I've had so many experiences with edibles, and because it's like, well, I smoke weed, I should be okay, and I took an edible, I do the math, and then I'm like, not having a fun experience, and it can be really unpleasant. So just from personally, that's what I think. So yeah, start at a really small dose and then work your way up. So if you're like, okay, I took it an hour ago or 2 hours because I listened to Stacey, I don't feel anything, then take another 10 milligrams. And again, just like wait for an hour. So like slowly build your tolerance up. A good way to do that, if you want to build a higher tolerance, is to take it while you're sleeping, like take it before bed, because then you're building your tolerance as you're sleeping. So you could, kind of, I don't know why you'd want a higher tolerance, but let's say you did. The subdermal is going to be really easy because it'll hit you really fast. So you'll know pretty quickly, like, okay, I've had enough, or I can probably take some more because, after 5 minutes, that's as high as you're going to be until you start taking more. Right. So, yeah.
So you've moved from doing classes directly to people. So now you've got your online business. So,
yeah.
So how does that work?
Yeah, well, so it's my teacher training program. So I started a 200-hour yoga teacher training program, and I set it up so that you can be a current yoga teacher or you can have no yoga training at all. And it's from my knowledge and my background with Pilates and yoga and cannabis. And it's a comprehensive program. So I talk about the benefit, I teach people how to teach yoga and how to incorporate cannabis. So the science behind both, the philosophy behind both, and how they integrate. And then I also do like individual coaching sessions as well through Zoom. So both are through Zoom. The teacher training program is set up online so you can do modules at a self-paced pace. So you can get through the program, as quickly as you'd like, which usually takes about like 6 months at the fastest, up to a year for people with normal lives who probably have other things going on. And then, like I said, individual coaching sessions. It's a little bit different. Obviously, being hands-on helps a lot, but as long as I can see your body, then you can set it up so that I can take you through a private lesson.
Okay.
So,
and so you do that all through your computer. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Wow. And then the trainers that you're training up, is that the model that they tend to use, where they're doing more virtual trainings, or are you seeing them go off and do it in sports halls and stuff?
I leave it up to them. You know, a lot of them actually are current teachers where they're teaching out of a yoga studio, and they just want to know how to incorporate cannabis. Like, they want that information. And a few are, you know, just brand new, and the teaching that they're doing is them fulfilling the requirements of my program, because they have to get teaching hours to graduate. So I have a student in Boston who's teaching out of her home that she's teaching, you know, just in her attic. There's a student who she's already got her own Marijuasana style classes that she's teaching in San Francisco, and she does an amazing program that she's come up with. Like, I mean, she's taken it, and she already had some background on her own, but she's taken it to where it's like this, like, fully, like, conscious cannabis, where they have like a really in-depth experience that they go through. And so she's got her own studio in San Francisco, and it just, you know, some people, I think, I don't know if they'll actually end up doing anything. They just want to go through the program and for their own learning, you know, kind of varies person to person.
So are they Marijuasana certified trainers? Do they use your brand name?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us about how you came up with that name?
So, yeah, no, that's a good question. And thank you for saying it correctly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so asana, it helps to know the word asana, which is a Sanskrit word. It means to sit with or pose, is how it's translated. And yoga poses, and a lot of words in yoga end in asana. So, for example, triangle pose in Sanskrit is trikonasana. Shavasana. And so you take the Sanskrit word, it ends in asana, to sit with a triangle or what have you. So it was really just a brainstorm, and I don't know where it came from, but it was like, oh, you know, okay, marijuasana, like, there we go. And I did a quick search to see if the domain had been taken, and it was open. And I'm like, there we go. That's perfect. Marijuasana. And I think of it as a portmanteau, right? Like, it's not breakfast, it's not lunch, it's brunch.
Yeah.
So Marijuasana is cannabis yoga.
Right. Do you think people are starting to take it seriously? Like I guess a lot of people listen to our podcast are not just in the US and maybe not in the States where this is legal. So it's probably quite a stretch to start thinking this could be mainstream. But do you think that people will start to take it seriously, and you'll see more of this? You know, from what you're explaining, it sounds like it's there's a lot of positive coming from it. But yeah. I guess if you're unsure and you don't have the full information, it could be quite worrying as well, I suppose. What are your thoughts on where it's going? I
think it will be. I think it'll just continue to grow, and I feel like it'll also start to become a segment of holistic healing that, you know, or alternative healing, that a lot of practitioners will start taking a look at cannabis and like ways that they can incorporate it into massage, you know, especially anything like involving meditation or movement. I feel like fitness trainers beyond yoga and Pilates will also start taking a look at it, especially once they start to realize, you know, these studies that are coming out and how it does increase motivation and recovery. And also, I forgot to mention, they're starting to kind of recategorize the runner's high, like the high that you get from exercise, as actually being as a result of the endocannabinoid system and not endorphins.
Really?
Yeah. So it's actually anandamide and not endorphins, I guess.
So what's happening with that then? Have you got sort of the kind of cannabis stuff inside your body then, or something? Or?
It goes back to the endocannabinoid system.
Right.
Yeah, so the endocannabinoid system regulates and modulates every system of the body. So it's always working to create homeostasis. So as neurotransmitters are released, and, you know, the cascade of hormones and neurotransmitters are like constantly at work in your body, your endocannabinoid system is working to regulate what's being you know, overproduced or underproduced. And so when you're running or you're exercising, you're basically shifting into anandamide being released and taken up by by the receptors in your body, and so you're getting flooded with anandamide, and then that starts to increase other neurotransmitters like dopamine and et cetera, et cetera. So so they're saying it's actually the endocannabinoid system that's being activated, and it literally, like I said, it literally affects every single system of the body.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's been some of the challenges of building the business like this? I guess marketing probably is one of them.
Marketing is a challenge. Also, finding space has been a challenge.
Is it because people just don't want that type of thing going on in their facilities, or?
Not necessarily. It's mostly staying compliant. It's mostly figuring out how to allow consumption. And if it's like I was saying before, if it's just CBD and hemp, most of the time, that's not necessarily an issue, but compliance is just kind of a concern. And for me personally, I'm hesitant to invest in something that's like a brick and mortar with all that overhead until it's like 100%. Like I don't have to worry about anybody coming in and telling me I can't, be in operation anymore. So that's definitely an issue. Just finding like some sort of permanent location has been a concern. That, and then it's a small concern, but I think there's also this tendency for people to think of it as like a gimmicky yoga, where they feel like, it's like, oh, it's like goat yoga, right? And it's and it's like, well, not exactly. I can see why people put that thought together, where they feel like it's just like some kind of crazy, like wacky thing. And on the one hand, it's great because at least I'm getting their attention, but I hope that it translates into like an acceptance and like understanding that it's actually legitimate.
So if someone wants to do your online course, and is this available anywhere around the world?
It is. Yeah, it is.
So how do people find you and follow you?
Marijuasana.com, and it's, that's everywhere. Marijuasana, it's MARIJUASANA. So that's on Instagram, YouTube, the World Wide Web, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. So yeah.
Okay. So they can contact you through there, and then they can book a virtual certification course, is it?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, they can apply. I do have an application that I like people to fill out, just so I can make sure that they're sincere about wanting to apply to be a teacher. But as far as a coaching session, that's pretty much open to everybody. So. And
even places where the THC is not legal, you can still do this with CBD. So in places like the UK, which I think it's legal. I've seen a couple of companies that have opened up in the UK.
Right. I don't know if it's technically legal, but they're in operation. So, yeah. I mean, I trust the people, if they're in the privacy of their own home, that they've got it covered. So yeah.
Okay. So final question then, Stacey. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be an example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Yeah, I think it would be starting my company. Just really deciding just that I didn't care what anybody thought, and I wanted to be bold. And giving myself permission to do that. Yeah, just really stepping into it and owning it.
What do you think was the trigger that sort of pushed you over the edge to actually go and do it? Because I guess lots of people want to leave. You mentioned before you was in this corporate job and you didn't really like it, but it was security. What was the thing that kind of pushed you over the edge on that?
It was an article that I read a long time ago, that when people are aging, and they interviewed people who were at the end of their lives, and they found that what the biggest regrets that they had were the things that they did not try to do, the things they left undone, the dreams that they had that they didn't go for. And I really took that to heart, and that's actually affected me a couple of times in my life, where I've been like, if I, am I going to be okay with just leaving this on the shelf, or you know, and then being like, no, I don't think I will be. I think I better go for it. So you know, that's what I would say to anyone who's like, well, you know, should I do that? You know, like, what does that mean? It's like, if you have something, if you have a dream or a passion that you're telling yourself is impossible, that you can't do it, you know, maybe literally just try to like kind of fast forward and say like, will I be happier in the end that I didn't try? And, you know, let that be your answer. So.
You've certainly taken a lot of risks, and I guess being an entrepreneur is about risk taking, and certainly being in the space you're in, and as a woman, female entrepreneur as well, you've taken some great risks, and I'm sure that it'll be worth it. So I thank you very much for your time and sharing everything about your business, and I wish you success in the future. So.
Thank you so much, Matthew. This
Thank
has
you,
been
Stacey.
great. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.